This was probably the most disturbing phone call I think I've ever had. She said, "I don't know how else to say this to you, but they're not even going to let you teach in a classroom."
I call it Tom's Excellent Adventure with Hamline University, where you were hired, supposedly, and then not hired because of, well, I mean, they've kind of admitted it, actually. One of the professors finally admitted in the Pioneer Press, I guess it was Friday, that really it was your stance on gay marriage, and we can't have you here, and we don't want you here, very intolerant of other people's points of view.
I am a radio talk show host. I had my own law firm, did mostly defense work, defending people and their businesses in civil lawsuits. But then I also served for 6 years in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and I was the Republican-endorsed candidate that ran for governor in Minnesota in 2010, losing after a recount by approximately 8,300 votes out of 2.2 million cast. Jackie and I and our 7 kids have enjoyed a great life in Minnesota, and what's the next step? I've always wanted to teach. I met the people at Hamline University. I met the new dean of the business school. Her statement to me on September 19th was, "Tom, you know, if we're a higher education institution that believes that we should provide all points of view on our campus," she said, "then we should put our money where our mouth is, and that's why I would like to bring you on." So she offered me the job of executive in residence. In return, she asked me, "What do I want?" And I told her I want to teach. She said, "We can do that." She put me in touch with a newly formed department within Hamline University, which needed an adjunct professor to teach business law to undergraduate students. What happened next is what's so disturbing. I was attending my first faculty meeting. Jim, who I had met first, slapped his forehead, looked across the table and said, "Tom, did you run for governor?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, Jim, I did." And then the look on his face, you know, if you could use the word priceless, he was not only visibly distraught, but he was almost stuttering when he said, "And are you on the faculty here now?" And I turned to Chris and I said, "Chris," I asked her to answer. She looked at Jim and she said, "Jim, Tom is going to be joining the business school as an executive in residence, and he's going to be teaching a few courses." I didn't hear another word until 2 days later. It was a Friday night, and I got a phone call from the dean of the business school, who I had entered into the agreement with, and she said, "I just want to make you aware of what's going on. Right after the faculty meeting that you attended, one or more of the professors," and I found out later, one was this Jim Bonilla, which will become important later, had gone out of the meeting and gotten involved on their university Facebook site or website, whatever it was, and had started a movement to oppose my hiring at the university. Wednesday, she called me, the day before Thanksgiving. This was probably the most disturbing phone call I think I've ever had. I said, "Tom, I have the worst news for you. We can't go forward with the executive in residence." She said, "I don't know how else to say this to you, but they're not even going to let you teach in a classroom." They had published an article in their school newspaper the day before this phone call in which it said, "Emmer hired." 2 weeks later, I want to say it was December 6th, they published another article in the school newspaper, and this time the article said, "Emmer was never hired," and it was loaded with misrepresentations. The worst part about the article is a quote from David Schultz, the same professor who was quoted in the earlier article on November 22nd, in which he says the professors had a couple of concerns about my hiring because of my political views and specifically my views on marriage. I have a belief that marriage is about a man and a woman and a union that is blessed by the Creator. Jim Bonilla, I told you at the beginning of the story, was going to become important. Why? Because Jim couldn't help himself in talking to the press. He said that somebody like me with such strident views about right and wrong, with such strident views about marriage, would make for an uncomfortable place for gays and lesbians. This country is based on a free and open discussion of every point of view. And if you are going to truly preach, tolerance, then by gosh, you ought to practice it. And that means you ought to tolerate our point of view when it comes to the definition of marriage as being between a man and a woman.
To help Tom and other citizens facing threats to their person, property, or livelihood because they speak up for marriage, please visit www.marriageada.org.